Black Lives Matter is back in the news after New York Magazine exposes its $6 million mansion. BLM does not apologize, but instead harasses the journalists to expose them. Welcome to America Uncovered. I'm Chris Chappell. This episode is sponsored by Blinkist. Do you want to read books that make you more confident and more educated, but you don't have enough time? Well, Blinkist gives you access to thousands of amazing titles in audiobook form. It's an easy way to get more knowledgeable every day. I'll tell you more at the end. So, there's been a lot of criticism of Black Lives Matter in recent years. I'm not talking about the international movement to fight police brutality and systemic racism. I'm talking about the increasingly unaccountable nonprofit organization that's been accused of doing some very shady things with millions of dollars in donations. That's the Black Lives Matter Global Network Foundation, which sometimes goes by BLMGN or sometimes BLMGNF. It's the nonprofit charity that owns the website blacklivesmatter.com, which means BLMGNF is the organization that people associate with the idea that Black Lives Matter, which also means that it's the organization that people donated millions of dollars to in order to show their support of that idea. Following the death of George Floyd in 2020, BLMGNF raised $90 million. After expenses and disbursements to local BLM chapters, it had over $60 million left over. But as a nonprofit organization, BLMGNF didn't disclose to the IRS how it used the money. This got BLMGNF in legal hot water. If you want to learn more about it, check out our previous episode. The link is below. But since that episode was published, BLMGNF was able to further delay their financial disclosures through an accounting gimmick. BLMGNF hired high-profile lawyer Mark Elias, who's worked for the Democratic National Committee and the Hillary Clinton presidential campaign. With Elias's help, BLMGNF was able to switch from calendar year to fiscal year tracking. This means that they now have until mid-May to submit their IRS info instead of last month. But that still doesn't solve BLMGNF's transparency problem. We still don't know who controls the $60 million that it has on hand. And it might have actually been a lot more money than that, thanks to direct corporate and foundation donations. But no one knows exactly how much. As a high-profile nonprofit charity taking people's donations, this lack of transparency is really bad. Even within its own ranks, BLM has grown more divided. In a very public dispute, several chapters broke away, claiming that the group's national leaders had failed to provide financial transparency or include the chapters in decision-making. As the scandal grew, several BLM leaders quietly jumped ship to avoid accountability. But now we know more of where some of that money went. A 6,500 square foot mansion worth about $6 million. More after the break. Welcome back. BLM is in trouble for its shady financial practices. And it's not just right-wing media reporting on this. Last week, New York Magazine revealed BLMGNF secretly bought a $6 million house in California. New York Magazine did an entire cover issue on how socialism is totally cool now, so yeah, it's pretty left-leaning. They're not out to attack BLM over ideology. The $6 million house New York Magazine is talking about is different from BLM co-founder Patrisse Cullors' 4 high-end homes, because as far as we know, those were purchased by Cullors with her own money. But this $6 million house was purchased in cash in October 2020 with money donated to BLMGNF. So what does $6 million get you in California? 7 bedrooms and 6.5 bathrooms, including a guest house, a pool, and a soundstage. Again, this wasn't bought with any of the BLMGNF leaders' personal money. It's actual donation money. The purchase came just 2 weeks after BLM received a $66.5 million cash infusion from its former fiscal sponsor on October 6, 2020. The transaction had not been reported. In fact, it seems like the BLM leadership had hoped to keep the house's existence a secret. On October 21, 2020, BLMGNF provided donor funds to Diane Pascal, a self-described nonprofit real estate investor who manages an LLC, or limited liability company, run by BLM co-founder Patrisse Cullors. 6 days later, Pascal transferred the property's deed to the law firm Perkins Coie. You may remember Perkins Coie. It was the law firm hired by Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign to do opposition research on Trump that resulted in the now debunked Steele dossier that was the basis of the Russia collusion narrative. And BLMGNF's new lawyer, Mark Elias, used to work for Perkins Coie too. What a small world. Anyway, according to BLM board member Shalomaya Bowers, BLM used middlemen for the property purchase to avoid exposing BLM's assets to any litigation or liability. Which might be true, but it also conveniently meant the ultimate identity of the property's new owner was not disclosed to the public. When New York Magazine asked about it, BLM leaders struggled to describe what the mansion, which they called campus, exactly is. In an internal memo, BLMGNF floated the idea of describing the house this way. Campus is part of the cultural arm of the organization, potentially as an influencer house, where Abolition Plus-based content is produced by artists and creatives. The memo also describes the property as a safe house for leaders whose safety has been threatened. As New York Magazine points out, the two notions, that the house is simultaneously a confidential refuge and a place for broadcasting to the widest possible audience, are somewhat in tension. Yeah, somewhat. In an emailed statement on April 1st, Shalomaya Bowers said campus was bought with the intention for it to serve as housing and studio space for recipients of the Black Joy Creators Fellowship. The fellowship provides recording resources and dedicated space for Black creatives to launch content online and in real life, focused on abolition, healing justice, urban agriculture, and food justice, pop culture, activism, and politics. And what do you know, that fellowship just so happened to be announced after New York Magazine started asking about that secret mansion. On the same day they gave that email statement. BLMGNF told News One that the house will provide both living spaces for artists to be in residence, as well as communal spaces for collaboration. There will be a recording studio and a production space on site set up for artists and creatives to film, host live performances, garden, dream, mediate, and build joy. But why did it take so long for BLMGNF to announce this? They've had the mansion since 2020. You don't mean to tell me they never planned this until New York Magazine questioned them, right? For a space that's supposed to produce content from Black artists, relatively little content has been made. The most notable were videos from Patrisse Cullors' YouTube channel, which she deleted. Some were part of Patrisse Tries, a series that's just focused on Patrisse trying unfamiliar things. It looked less like a channel for political activism and more like a regular YouTube influencers page. Doing things like, I tried baking a family recipe for the first time. Intense. That video was filmed in the kitchen of the California house. And Patrisse Tries pole dancing. I don't think that one was filmed at the mansion, but it does give me an idea for my next episode. But when people donated to BLM, a $6 million house is probably not what they imagined their money would go towards. That could get BLM into some legal trouble. I'll explain after the break. Welcome back. BLMGNF bought a $6 million mansion with donated money, which arguably does very little to actually fight police brutality and systemic racism. This actually isn't the first time BLMGNF spent millions on a mansion. But the purchase in California is getting a lot of backlash. In response to the negative publicity, Patrisse Cullors took to Instagram and said the article is despicable abuse filled with misinformation. What's happening to me and to our movement is both racist and sexist, even though the reporter who wrote this story is a Black man at a left-leaning magazine. Cullors also explained the reason it wasn't announced prior is not nefarious as the headline infers. The property needed repairs and renovation. But the real estate listing from 2020 doesn't really give the impression that it needed a lot of repairs or renovations. There was a lot of focus on the high-end finishes in the house. Custom wrought iron staircase, Gallicata gold stone, beautiful custom millwork throughout the luxurious home. 3 fireplaces, 1 imported from Italy. Marilyn Monroe and Humphrey Bogart stayed as guests in this estate. Not exactly something that's too shoddy to reveal, unless you think it needs some stripper poles. Some say the mansion purchase could lead to legal issues. According to an expert in nonprofits, details of the house's management deserves closer scrutiny. He says investigation by state and federal agencies could be warranted, especially if there are problems with BLMGNF's tax filings. They're all indicators that the money may not be going where it's supposed to be going. And there could be civil and criminal liabilities for the people and organizations involved. An attorney for a watchdog group, the National Legal and Policy Center, says it appears that BLMGNF's purchase and use of the house by Colors and other insiders violate the IRS rule prohibiting the use of nonprofit assets for private benefit as well as self-dealing. California Congressman Darrell Issa says the information is more than enough to warrant an investigation from the Department of Justice. So this looks really bad for BLM. Even BLM activists have been shocked. But rather than trying to be transparent and accountable, or maybe even a touch apologetic, BLM leaders would rather intimidate reporters into not covering the story. According to New York Magazine, BLMGNF board member Shalomaya Bowers and his associates hired private investigators to try and dig up dirt on their detractors and journalists, including New York Magazine reporter Sean Campbell. This isn't the first time BLMGNF has tried to stop people from reporting negatively about the organization. Campbell was able to see messages that BLM leaders were sending on Signal to monitor negative mentions of BLMGNF on social media. They had a chat group called the BLM Security Hub, and members tried to use their influence with social media platforms to have those negative remarks removed. And apparently it's working. For example, Facebook won't let you share this New York Post story about Color's real estate buying binge, labeling it as abusive. Repressing possible corruption just because it's done by people on your team spells disaster. This is not good whether you support the BLM movement or not, and it hurts the people who are actually trying to change things on the ground.
Leaders that I've spoken with some chapters, they're upset. They feel like these resources could have been put to better use. They could have been done more efficiently. I know Tory Russell in Ferguson, he's been working with Mike Brown Sr., who is father of the slain Mike Brown Jr., whose death sparked the protests in Ferguson in 2014. He's been struggling to get $1.2 million for a community center that would have the opportunity to provide safe housing or housing for some of the activists he's seen go homeless.
Wow, if only there were some extra millions of dollars lying around. And this episode is sponsored by Blinkist. Blinkist is great if you want to have read more books, but don't actually have time to read all those books. Here's how it works. Blinkist takes thousands of nonfiction books and condenses the key points into blinks, basically short versions. This way you can get the most important parts of a long book in just 10 or 20 pages, so you can basically understand the whole picture. Blinkist also makes a lot of them into audiobooks, the short kind, and even some full-length versions. Blinkist has over 5,000 titles you can choose from, so chances are whatever book you're looking for is available there. And if you're not sure what you want, Blinkist will give you suggestions. Just tell it what you're interested in: science, politics, education, and dozens more categories. To give an example, Blinkist recommended me this book, Start with Why: How Great Leaders Inspire Everyone to Take Action. It's about how, as a leader, you can change the way you approach problems, from asking what to asking why, and achieve greater success. Obviously, this will help tremendously when I'm running for Supreme Leader of these United States. Blinkist condensed this 250-page book into a short 13-minute read. Blinkist already has 14 million active users, and right now, Blinkist has a special offer just for our audience. Click the link in my description to start your free 7-day trial with Blinkist and get 25% off a premium membership. So check out the link below. Your 7-day trial is completely free and you can cancel at any time during this period. So try it out and see how much you can learn. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. Thanks for watching America Uncovered.